Good day to you. I'm sure that you've all had a teacher in your life, whether it's high school or college, where you have just really felt like it was a great experience to listen to them. There was something about their personality, some kind of magnetism that they had that made them really interesting to listen to. I'm sure you've had that kind of person. And if you have, you've had a person who knows how to speak in a way that both informs and also inspires. And so that's what today's second video lecture is on. It's on those subjects. And by the end of this video lecture, what I would like you to know is how people are able to inform and inspire when they deliver speeches. So let's talk about the main points for my subject today. The first one that I'm going to cover is the person's credibility. The second one I'm going to cover is their charisma. The third one is speaking at special occasions. That's an important skill to have. Fourthly, I'm going to talk about after dinner speeches. And then fifthly, I'm going to talk about speeches of inspiration, particularly speeches of inspiration. That's what this video lecture will be all about. Those are 5 points I'm going to cover. So let's talk about the first one, credibility. Credibility, the book goes at length to discuss. It's basically when you believe the speaker. They are believable. They are trustable. And people get credibility by different ways. There's initial credibility. That's credibility that people have by their prior reputation. When you go in to see a doctor and they're going to try to persuade you to follow a certain course of action to improve your health, whether that involves taking prescriptions or whether that involves lifestyle changes, you're going into that office already assuming that they have credibility because you know they have a medical degree. So there's already a believability that comes into play. You're not usually questioning what your doctor is telling you because they do have initial credibility. They have credentials. And their clothes also suggest credibility as well. Doctors often wear white smocks in the United States, and that's something that has become a symbol of the certified doctor. And so those speakers, they have an advantage from the start because they already have credibility. They already have a certain believability to them. But not all speakers have that, especially speakers speaking about subjects where they don't have credentials. They have experiences, but maybe not credentials. And so that brings up the second kind of credibility, which is derived credibility. Derived credibility is where you get credibility because the content of your message is presented in a way that suggests that it's truthful and that it has integrity. So you support your ideas with evidence, like we talked about in the last video, evidence coming from research sources. That gives you credibility. You're providing that evidence. And also that your speech is well organized can give off credibility as well, just by the way that you move through a subject. If it's organized into clear main points and you're working through those points with transitions, then you're helping yourself to derive your own credibility within this speech. You know what it's like when you see the opposite scenario, that is a teacher who is disorganized. You start to say, oh boy, they go off on tangents all the time. Or I don't understand what they're talking about. Now you're starting to question their believability and how much of an authority they are on a subject. So you want to be organized and you want to be able to allow your message to lend credibility to you as a person. And then finally, there is enduring credibility. Enduring credibility is that credibility that remains with the audience. People who are perceived as energetic and friendly or assertive and empathetic, those are people that tend to have enduring credibility. Energy, friendly, honorable, assertive, empathetic. Empathetic is when you can feel for others. So this is when the audience perceives that you actually care about their interests, that you're actually talking about what you're talking about because it's for their benefit. If an audience perceives that, then you're going to have enduring credibility with them. And that's a tough thing to accomplish in a speech, but it certainly is something that makes the speech much better and have much longer lasting impact. Next up is the idea of charisma. When I asked you about that teacher at the beginning of this video lecture who you thought just had some kind of magnetism to him, that's what charisma is. There's something about them. There's a likability. There's a dynamism. You know what dynamism is? They change. They're dynamic. They can be really, really somber one moment of speech. They can be really happy another moment of speech. They're dynamic. Also, charisma is gained by having vision. If you're able to see into the future and think at a level that says, things are the way they are now, but they're not always going to stay that way. What do we want to happen in the future? This is what the future is going to look like. We're going to be in a future where people are in self-driven cars and people are getting to places through drones. And so that's going to change the entire way that we live our lives. We're not going to be focused so much on having to get into a vehicle and be prepared to drive long distances ourselves. things are going to be handled for us a lot by automatic pilots in drones and automatic pilots even in cars, self-driven cars. If I'm talking in a way that makes it sound like I'm talking about the future, in a way that makes it realistic and also enticing, then I'm hopefully having some charisma. So charisma is related to vision. And also charisma is related to spontaneity. Nobody really likes to see a speaker who seems so well prepared that everything is already planned out ahead of time. Every word, every sentence, every idea. No, we like to see spontaneity. We like to see people suddenly say, "Hey, have you see that painting? I wasn't going to talk about this, but I'm going to talk about it now. That painting was done by a former art professor, Miharu Lane. It's one of my favorite paintings that she did. She gave it to me for my 50th birthday, and it's just a beautiful, lush setting in nature with a guy in a kayak on what could be the Delaware River. That's where she was doing a lot of painting when she did things like that. Okay. Spontaneity is a very important part of achieving charisma in a speech. Now let's go on to where you might be speaking if you're not giving a formal speech, an information speech, or a persuasive speech. You might be giving a speech that's speaking at a special occasion. And so the speech at a special occasion, there are different kinds of speeches that qualify that you may find yourself delivering. So one kind of speech is a speech of introduction. And that's where you're bringing in a guest speaker, but you're going to be the one introducing them. When you deliver a speech of introduction, you're not the main focus, so you don't want to hog up a lot of time. You want to make your speech brief. And basically what you want to do is connect the speaker and the topic to the audience. So who is the speaker? What is the topic that they're going to speak about? And why should you listen? Those are the things that you get across in a speech of introduction. Another kind of speech that is very common that you may have already given is an acceptance speech for those who have received awards. In those speeches, it's very common to thank people, the people who have given you the award. It's also important to acknowledge the people who have supported you, family and friends, whether you do that by name or not. But the third thing is sometimes forgotten, and that is to honor the occasion of the award. Why is this award given out? Why is it an important award to give out? When WESS won the Woody Award, it wasn't just something that we talked about that we won. We wanted to honor the fact that a Woody Award is given to a radio station that goes against the status quo. That's why the Woody statue that you receive is a block of wood like you would have for your fireplace, and it has a big wedge going down the middle of it because the metaphor there is you're splitting the status quo, you're changing things. And so when we received our Woody Award, we made sure to talk about how our programming is not the same as you'll find on commercial radio. It's programming that is very different. It challenges the other songs, the Taylor Swifts and the Bruno Mars and all those other people who are played all the time on radio. It's not what WESS does. We do a little of that, but we do stuff that is, band. My radio show is the Rolling Stones, but I play a lot of live music, stuff that you would never hear if you ever heard a classic rock station that was playing the Stones. I play a lot of live music. So you want to honor the occasion in an acceptance speech. Now let's talk about what we call loosely speeches of tribute. There's a few different kinds of these. These are special occasion speeches as well, but they're tribute speeches. One is a toast. It's done over cocktails, or it's done over a dinner, or it's done after a person's been away for a long time. They've been injured. Suddenly they've come back. It's done to toast a best man. It's done to toast people who are having anniversaries. It's done to toast the fact that you and some friends that haven't been around each other for a long time are suddenly getting together again. And so in this, you should talk about what it is that you used to do together that you enjoyed so much and that solidified your friendship. You should also be talking about where the person has gone and traveled, both in terms of their physical life and also in terms of what they've done for themselves in terms of growing as a person. These are very common things to talk about in a toast as a speech of tribute. The next kind of tribute speech is not a fun one to give, but it's very meaningful and it happens very often, and that is the eulogy. The eulogy is to commemorate somebody who has died, somebody who has passed away. And so you honor them in that speech. But at the same time, what you're trying to do is comfort the people who are still living, and that's not easy. So, of course, there's going to be some sad moments in the eulogy. Maybe the speech is going to start that way, but after that, then you can perhaps start to talk about the person's quirks and how they were funny. And this is something that this person did and nobody else did. It's what made them unique. Now you're starting to open up a way of feeling in the audience that's giving them comfort, that they were touched by this other person's very unique attributes, And even though they're not around anymore, they can still remember those moments and perhaps even carry them on with themselves. All right, next up, let's talk about the fourth point, which is after dinner speeches. These are not as serious as the tribute kind of speeches, but yet they are supposed to enlighten the audience in some way and at the very least entertain them. These kinds of speeches have a central theme to them, and they take into account that the audience is sitting around at a table and finishing a meal. So let's say that you have friends and they built a house and they decided to take a chance, and both of the people in the relationship quit their jobs and they've started their own business while they were building a house. Now comes the after dinner speech. Maybe you want to talk about how the theme of what it is that you're trying to say in this after dinner speech is that life does not yield any rewards unless you take risks. And taking a risk by quitting a job with medical benefits to form your own company is a big risk that is paying off for this particular couple. So after dinner speeches are not always as serious as tribute speeches like a eulogy speech, but they are also, they do have an enlightening quality to them. And this is one way that you can handle it by developing a theme that is meaningful to all the people at the table. And lastly now, to move to our fifth and final point for this video lecture, you have speeches of inspiration. These are done at staff meetings. A lot of sales forces have these kinds of meetings to try and motivate the sales force employees by giving them incentives. If you sell X amount of a product, then you can be eligible for a drawing for a cruise in the Caribbean, for example. Sometimes inspiration speeches are given at retreats. Faculty often have retreats. They're trying to handle some problems in their department, so they go to a quiet location or they go to a place with food and beverages. Sports teams constantly have speeches of information. Half times are full of locker room talks, pep talks. Come on, we're down, but we can still come back. When you graduate from ESU, the commencement speech that will be given is a speech of inspiration as well, to try and inspire you that the world that you're entering is not so scary and that you're going to be able to apply your talents and skills from your degree in ways that you would have never expected. When you give a speech of inspiration, you're wanting to draw on the shared values of the audience. What is it about the audience that everybody appreciates at a commencement speech? Well, one thing that everybody appreciates is what it takes to graduate from college these days, with all the bills that you have to pay, with all the distractions of having to work and social media, and how hard classes are today. It takes a lot to be able to graduate. It's a tremendous accomplishment. So that's a value in the audience, that this is a tremendous accomplishment, a 4-year accomplishment for most people. The speeches of inspiration should create passion in the audience. You should use inflection. You should be very, very adamant about what it is that you're talking about. This is how you demonstrate commitment to the values that are present in this particular situation of a commencement speech, but overall of a speech that's a speech of inspiration. Okay, so I hope that now gives you some ideas of what makes speakers good at inspiring and informing. I hope that's what I've accomplished in this video lecture. And I talked about 5 things. The first was how speakers get credibility. Secondly, about how they can have charisma. Thirdly, about how speeches at special occasions can be divided up into certain categories. Fourthly, about how after-dinner speeches differ from the other speeches that I mentioned. And lastly, how speeches of inspiration should have certain attributes. I hope if you ever get the chance to inspire a group of people in a speech that you can now call upon your own charisma as well as other talents that you already have.